Just to put a preface to this, I think that, the idea of exploration is not necessarily only finding solutions, also finding problems. See? And I think that's what we're here for. And I think that, to me, sometimes those problems, identification of problems, or even getting to a solution is not just linear. It also goes up and down, and it's a paradigm change. And that is what is happening. One way to look at the analogy I draw is that we talk about civilization. India say, oh, that many years ago, I did not know. Well, why? Because there's an analogy. When all we know from American history book is that Columbus discovered America. So the Native American said that, what the hell have we been doing here for thousands of years that we never discovered it? You see, that's the kind of analogy that we're good at these things. Basically, people come from outside and they discover India, they give us Indian history. So when we were growing up, there was a civilized world, and we were the uncivilized world, and then now we're undeveloped world. Okay? And so that's another analogy. And so civilization almost for many, many years has been a Western concept. And to me, Gandhiji had a very good answer to that. When he was asked that, what do you think about Western civilization? He said, it's a good idea. So, with that preface, we just go back to our exploration and discussion about Indus civilization. And I think that, to me, as we have seen, that it's bringing out a whole mosaic and whole really rainbow of the aspects of it. And so to me, it's now my very special pleasure to present to you somebody who if you thought her contribution just ended with lunch, it's not. This is actually now it will be once again Chandrika Govardhan, and so she will be. And she will be talking about the philosophy and religion. And just before that, let me mention that. Chandrika Govardhan has a PhD in chemistry from Wesleyan University in Connecticut. After an extensive postdoctoral training at Brandeis University, she started working in the biotech industry formulating drugs for different end use. She holds 7 patents and is passionate about learning, mentoring, and sharing. My pleasure to present you, Chandrika.
I really have a very tough act to follow, following Mr. Dudani, and he has really provided us with some fresh perspectives. And so some of what I have to say, I don't know, we have to rewrite it with his ideas. And thank you. And we really welcome you to contribute your ideas in the form of articles, and we welcome that. Thank you. So while I was preparing these slides, I was just wondering why, how did I end up with this track, religion and philosophy, mostly by a process of elimination. The others were picked then, but then I remember this particular instance. I was on a walk with my friend, and she said, what did you do yesterday? I said, I went to the temple. And she asked, how can, you're a scientist, and said, how can religion and scientists coexist? So that was there in the back of my mind, and that's probably why I was drawn to this topic. Anyway, being in the life sciences profession, in the eyes of the FDA, if it is not written, it does not exist. And if it is not, I would think that would be the same. If it is not decipherable, it does not exist. Really, FDA wants to take the guesswork out. But what do we have with Indus artifacts? It's everything is guesswork. So we've all seen the map of the Indus Valley, the expanse, and I want to point out the regions here also. Sometimes we don't pay attention, we pay attention to this region, but there are others. So just for my own purpose, I needed to know the distinction between religion and philosophy. And religion is a set of beliefs, feelings, dogmas, and practices that define the relation between human being and divinity, and it's basically based on faith. And the philosophy is a rational investigation of truth. The real philosophy pushes us to question our assumptions of common sense and what appears logical. Philosophers are devoted to wisdom, and they're not afraid to ask and think about big questions. And as I absorbed this definition, it dawned on me, isn't this what Indian tradition about? It asks us not to accept anything, but to test everything by experience, that's anubhava. And this is probably what the Indus people really must have experienced the anubhava to actually move on to the next age that followed is the Vedic age, which is a lot of wisdom and texts that we still go to as every day, and a lot of religions go to that text, to the Vedas for that. So the challenge that we have, again, as people alluded to earlier, is to move from the material world to the religious ideological system in the absence of written text. So what can we learn from the religious structures, the iconography, ritual practices, and death, the burial? Now, the basis for the interpretation and deduction from these artifacts is a direct historical output. You see something, so what can we do? And also, but you will compare it with present-day South Asian religions, and then also a comparative analysis with Mesopotamian and Sumerian civilization. So what I'm going to be talking about is derived from all of this. What we can tell is that the Indus people were into ritualistic practices, for which I will provide some evidence. The trees and animals were venerated. There's no evidence of religious structures. And there is the worship of deity, the mother fertility goddess that Mr. Dudani also mentioned that it's contained in the museum, and the belief in life after death. So the religious practices, the first one, the purification. Purification of body with a bath. So we see the great bath. We've all seen pictures of the great bath. And so is it, why do we have this great bath? This is a large rectangular watertight basin, and this is there even though there are bathing platforms in every house block. So why do we need this structure? Probably, this is where the people assembled for a ritual practice to cleanse themselves, And we also have, recently in October 2014, wells have been discovered in both Dholavira and Kutch. And the one in Kutch is 3 times bigger than the Great Bath. So we also have bathing platforms at Lothal and Kalibangan. Again, back to the question, why do we need the Great Bath structure when bathing platforms are found in every house block? Possibly for purposes of purification prior to a ritual practice, which is a practice still observed. And then maybe they were getting together for rituals coinciding with seasonal changes and astronomical events. I don't know. Just it's all guesswork. Maybe for goddess propitiation. And in the south, at least, where I'm from Chennai. So we actually find body of water within our outside temples that is used for rituals and for purification purposes before certain rituals. And we talked about purification of the body and also mind and body through what we see here on the side. You see a series of yogic pastures. These are terracotta, I believe it was terracotta figurines. So this is preparation of mind and body. Well, everybody else is speculating, so I'm also speculating. And so now we have, these are again terracotta female figurines, and I see, you can see the red pigment here. So this is a practice that we actually, we follow till today. Here's the continuation of the civilization moving from the Indus to now.
Can I just point out that those are not Indus figurines?
Oh, is it?
Those are Mehrgar figurines.
Okay.
They're earlier than the Indus period.
Okay, that's even better, I guess.
And the one on the left has yellow, by the way, and the one on the right
yes,
red.
yeah. But the fact that there were pigments there.
Oh, yeah.
I
just want to point out, because in the other talk too, those are not, she showed in the previous talk, she also showed those similar ones.
Okay.
But they're not Indus. They're pre-Indus.
Okay, I think, yeah, I'm glad you pointed out, we're figuring all this, we're bunching everything together as part of the Indus, but I understand
But
the
you can see
distinction.
the Indus ones are actually much cruder in some respects than these are, so.
Where do they came from then?
What's that?
Where do they come from? I'm just questioning.
Mehergar.
Well, they come from Baluchistan.
Mehergar.
Oh, okay.
But you're mentioning that, but they're wearing an upper cloth, but not covering their breasts.
We'll come to the question time.
Yeah, well, and I will look to our audience participation in helping interpret this as well. So we have an elephant head figurine with traces of red and white pigment. Again, you can see it over here. So this is a 4,500-year elephant head figurine with stylized widespread ears, and we have traces of white and red paint visible on the face. And I suggest that some wild elephants may have been tamed and ritually decorated, a practice that is done even now in India. Again, a continuation of the civilization. And moving on to another ritual practice, a lot of fire pits have been found in Kalimangan. So was fire part of the ritual practice? And we know that the fire is equally important in the Indian religions, and several fire altars have been uncovered in Kalimangan. And and what we also find is a bathing platform that is associated with these pits. Okay. And each pit, this is an important one, had a cylindrical placed, I don't know how to pronounce that, stele, how do you say this, Mrs.
Stela.
Stela? Okay. An upright stone or slab with an inscription, probably representing the lingam. Okay. That's one of the interpretations. So the houses in Kalibangan, they have a room with a fire altar as well, and cattle bones in some pits. Is this animal sacrifice? We don't know. But what's the other alternative explanation? Could these have been cooking hearths or kilns for pottery? So that's one of the things that we need to take into consideration interpreting this data.
Are those inscriptions in the Indus script?
Let me go back. I don't know. I have to look. And I think we've seen this figure before, which is this figurine. But what you see is these extensions that you see on the side. And this is they had the terracotta figurines with had headgear with side extensions. These are believed to hold oil lamps. So traces of oil and black residue were actually found in these. So as part of Misraji, as part of Indus artifact, we should create such things, and would be an easy sell. So where did they conduct these religious practices? There were no shrines. We really don't have any evidence for that. There is a citadel mound in Mohenjo-daro that you see pictured here, but we can't really confirm their use for a religious purpose, and there is no evidence of ritual practices or objects. So we're saying that they had all these ritual practices, then where did they do it? Could the religious practice have happened under trees? Possibly unlikely. We see, I'm going to present some seals. I thought there was one here. The seal features we have, I'm sure it's on the next slide, deity-like figure in a peepal tree, and individual adorned with horns and headdress bowed before figure. And this could be possibly a ritual or rite of passage. You probably, oh, there it is. Okay. So what are we talking about? This is the peepal tree, okay, with leaves. And here the deity inside of it. And here's the individual bow before the deity. And this is you see a stool here with probably a sacrificial head. And you see these 7 female figurines. Again, the figure of 7, which in the morning also was alluded to, which is significant in the Indian religion. So this could have been really, this is a narrative seal. There's a lot going on in here. There's a story behind this. And this is probably maybe a ritual or a rite of passage. And we also have, depending upon whether it is coming from Harappa or Mohenjo-daro, we saw that the deity was inside, but in this seal, what we have is, again, this peepal tree with the arch, under the arch of peepal tree and the deity under it. And you have pots with the peepal tree leaf, the 3 leaves, that is very common. And and the tree worship, you see this. This is a more recent picture, just saying that we do consider the trees sacred. So could the motive we see in seals and also a continuation of this into the current civilization. So the trees are being worshipped. So they are sacred spaces and symbols, especially in the absence of a temple. They are a place of refuge and sustenance, and they're symbols of fertility and protection. Peepal tree was considered the abode of a horned deity, as we saw, and religious activities involving numerous worshippers take place at the foot of the tree even now. And what we also see now, these are moving from trees to animals, and there are chimeric. These are animals and human combined. I took a chimera from of course, the life sciences, and one with also multiple heads. And so the tiger, what you will see in the seals is tiger is also a common motif. And the struggle between animals and humans probably used to tell stories to children and impart morals. You have all these. How do you share this with the family? And also we posed the question earlier: were there animal sacrifices? We don't know. But I think in one of the Kalibangan excavations in the fire pit, there was actually a camel a skeletal find that was found. But instead of these animal sacrifices, where the terracotta animals used of votive offerings in place of actual sacrifices, and you'll find a lot of these terracotta figurines also had holes in them. So where these functioned as amulets to protect against evil, etc. And this is the animal motifs continuing again. We saw this earlier this morning. And Mr. Dudani presented the proto-Shiva, the Pashupati seal. And this comes in that, but there's a lot of controversy. People don't want to call it as a proto-Shiva worship, and I think we still need to dig deeper and find out. Okay. And we saw this one also earlier, but what I want to point out to you, the stand that is here, and the vessel that is on top, which probably looks like this. These vessels can't stand on their own. They are on this. And under this, you will see little droplets of water. What's believed is these were offerings, and these vessels actually had a filter, and there's intoxicating drink called soma that was actually offered as part of the rituals. And so other ritual utensils and paraphernalia. We have a ladle made from shell and a conch. Again, as a vessel, or also to call upon the people to attend rituals. And we don't really know what these cone-shaped objects are, but we find
ice cream cones.
Could be. Yeah. So goddess figurines. And I'm showing you a few different ones that we didn't see earlier. And look at you can focus your attention on this particular one and the one here. So was there goddess worship? I don't know, and I will let Richard and anybody else to participate in the discussion. So who conducts the ritual practices? We said there are a number of ritual practices. Now, who conducts the ritual practices? Maybe the priest king. We don't know. And we've not really, everybody uses the same thing. I don't know how many more of these we have found, but looks this is the only one. There are other icons and symbols. The endless knot, which looks like a rangoli that you put that is practiced even now. And the swastika was already touched upon by Mr. Dudani. So we have the motifs, the endless knot, and it does not appear on other objects. This may be specific to a cultural community. The swastika, here's another interpretation, could represent the Purushartha, the four things, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Left or right turning may represent different schools of philosophy. Again, this is wide speculation, but I didn't put this in. This is in the literature. And we have the fish shield, we have the checkerboard design, the circle and dot, and the conical stone objects. And could these be phallic symbols? Or could they be part of the pestle, the mortar and pestle? And there are amulets or gaming pieces. And then moving on to the last of the evidence, which is burials with pottery. So we have, in both Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and now the figure that I have here is the excavated grave in Rakhigarhi. They had terracotta pots as funerary objects arranged around the head of the deceased, suggesting a belief in life after death. And whether the body is facing north, south, it depends upon what region it is from. There are no signs of trauma in all of these. As Mr. Dudani mentioned, there's a very, it looks like a peaceful society. More pictures of the burial, but nothing really specific to add. In the interest of time, I will move on. And sometimes you find the burials with expensive jewelry, and there's a group burial of the same community, and you have some with bangles, shell bangles or terracotta, depending upon what strata of the society you were. You were in different graves, and jewelry associated with initiation of protection was not passed on. So that was part of the burial. And female burials with jewelry, but male burials barely had any. In conclusion, it feels like Indus society was a ritualistic society. We talked about purification of body through bath and yoga, rituals that might have included fire, trees being used as sacred space and symbols, and animals and trees were venerated. They use utensils, conch, and ladles. This is a possible worship of the fertility goddess. Burial finds leads one to conclude that they believed in life after that. A number of these religious beliefs, as I pointed out, they have been continued to this day. And with that, I'd like to conclude, and thank you all for your attention. Just one comment. I really enjoyed this journey back in time. Looks like they were, it feels like we are in Kali Yuga now, but I don't know which Yuga they're in. It doesn't seem like that.
So thank you again. We have about 5 minutes for question and answer. So if you have a question, please go to the microphone and.
Andrika. Yes. I think Sir John Marshall raised the possibility that Mohenjo-daro people may have been Darya-panthis. That means no burial, no cremation. And they used to float their bodies into the river or the ocean. And that could be the reason he says there were no mass graves, there are no multiple skeletons found at Mohenjo-daro.
But then how do you explain the grave?
There actually have been graves found at Mohenjo-daro. There actually have been graves found at Mohenjo-daro. There are a few of them which were found during the stabilization of the site and the digging of the canals around it to drain the water away from the site. These are not published. They're in the museum in Karachi. But yes, there are an increasing number of graveyards which are found now in this area. So that site recently excavated in Farmana and in Haryana there are a large graveyard and there are an increasing number of graves. So, but this is not, they're minuscule compared to what the population was. So it's a question of where, and the graveyard at Farmana is way away from the settlement. So that's part of the problem, maybe part of the problem.
Good question there.
You can hold on to it, I think.
No,
You'll probably be able to answer.
Anybody has a question, please go to the microphone, yeah.
Greetings from fellows and Chennai citizens.
Oh,
I have one observation, which is Richard mentioned in that famous scene of the deity and the people, under the people. There are 7 figurines under the
Yep.
bottom,
Mhm.
and he called them female figures, but then he also said the gender is not known.
yeah.
You also showed it. I wanted to mention that we have a tradition of Sapta Kanika temples in Tamil Nadu.
Yep,
That's all.
yeah. Mhm. Thank you.
Quick, the last question.
I was in Crete not too long ago, and Crete, as many of you may know, is the seat of the earliest of European civilization, and actually many of the artifacts look very similar. But my question is that it was also found that the Christian people, or a Minoan people actually, it's called a Minoan civilization. Anyhow, they were very peaceful people, and they died. Nobody knows how that thing was extinguished. And similar thing was brought out here also. So the question to you, Chandrika, is that how did this civilization was extinguished? I mean, what happened to them? Is there any indication of that? And second question is, any indication of cross-fertilization? There's a lot of it.
Climate in the morning.
Yeah, I can answer some of it, but I'll let Richard.
I think the morning session, the geography person did analyze that, and the climate and the rainfall and so on were kind of part of the problem that Steve mentioned about. Any other question? Let's move on. You have a question, sir? Yeah. Oh.
First observation, like I like the bibliography at the very end, the references cited. I think it would be pretty useful if you share it to the group or to the outside world. That was pretty neat. Second thing was, what kind of, like in the religion, you always see the different kind of weapons the different kind of gods are having. So, what kind of weapons, or like in sense to kill the animals, or between them, like in this, most of the times we were, like in sense I was looking into, there were no fights between the groups, but what kind of weapons were used to kill the animals, or even when there were disputes?
Yeah.
Is there any kind of indication of that?
It will come later.
I thought they found spears.
It will come later. So we will come to that, the administration and politics and so on. All right, move on.
So our next topic is science and technology. It's by Krishna Gazula. And let's see. Krishna, please. Okay. And Krishna Gazula earned his doctorate degree in metallurgy from IIT Kanpur. He works as an IT professional and is a serial entrepreneur. He serves as a teacher in Indian history and philosophy at Shishu Bharati, the School of Language and Culture of India. He's a very active volunteer at IDC. Thank you, Krishna.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you for all coming. One thing I will confess, Chandrika, I didn't do any research on ice cream making. So that is excluded, okay, from this.
Part of the speculation.
Yes. But, so as Richard said, this presentation does not just related to Harappan or Indus civilization, but what we call it is both the entire Sindhu Saraswati civilization, a lot more than just Indus civilization. So that's what we are bringing evidence from. Very precise, a scale with a lot of precision, right? So some of these scales were made to the extent of about 0.005 inches precision. So that kind of scales, and later on they moved on to other types of material, which I'll talk about it. But more interestingly, these scales were made, like later on in Ardhashastra, some of these units were mentioned. Probably they came from when these scales were kind of manufactured or invented. One is Yuva, which is about 2.2 millimeters, and the major unit is angulam. Even today, before the British came to India, we used to use the word angulam or inch. It's about 17.6 millimeters. And then dhanas, which is about 108 angulams, equal to 1 dhanas, about 19 meters. This dhanas, which is most of the researchers refer to as D, has a lot of significance in the entire, not only just Indus Valley, Harappan civilization, but the entire Sindh Saraswati Valley constructions and usage. So these scales were found in Dholavira, Lothal, and Kalibagan, and other places as well. So later on, the scales, rulers were made of ivory, and some of them were found in Indus Valley about 1500 BCE. Lothal about 2400 BCE, like a very accurate scale. This is an example of how they were using the measurement D, dhanas, right? So this street in Harappa, Mazumdar, about half D, 9 meters width of the street. So just to give an example of how widespread these standards are.
I think you made a decimal point mistake. 1 dhanush is 1.92 meters.
1.92 meters?
Not 19.2.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Circa, is about 38.8 meters of street width. Mohamzadaro about 1D. Timi, which is east of Kathmandu. So again, the point is these measurements, these kind of standards were very widespread, not just belong to one region. Same way blocks in Indus Valley, 1, 2, 3 kind of a thing, or 1, 2, 4 type of measurements. This is one of the brick samples, 17 by 14 by 28 centimeters dimensions with the brick making. These are clay bricks, fired bricks. Most of the times are just unfired bricks were used in Indus Valley. And this is another example of how these standards were used across the across the Sindh Saraswati civilization. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but different ratios when they're building the roads and buildings and lakes, as you saw, Great Bath and so on, and water structures when they're building. They were using these standards, multiples of these, what they were using. And these are angles, made of shell compasses to, build these structures. And in the weights, we have seen, several of these presentations earlier. There are a number of weights were found. For example, in Harappa, in the layer of about 500 meters, which it belongs to about 500 years. They found about 500 to 600 weights. Mostly they're all different, shapes. Basically they're in different conditions. So these are some of the researchers claim these are binary decimal type of weight measurements they were using. But I was talking to some of the people from India. They thought maybe they are octal or multiples of 4. A good example is 4 chavas equal to 1 dhan, 4 dhans equal to 1 rati, and then 8 ratis equal to 1 masha, and so on, right? So these are some of the measurements even today you hear in if you go to rural India. So probably these multiples of 4s what they were using in Sindh Saraswati Valley. And then 1 bhari equal to 11.6 grams, that is 1 tula, I think they say. So these seems to be weights again looks like they were using very standard weights around in the entire the valley. And they were using balances. This is one of the samples of balances found in Mahamzadara, probably about 2600 BC or 2000 BC. So the conclusion is, looks like in modern times, Sindh Saraswati Valley have been standardized some of these measurements, both in linear as well as weights. In terms of science and technology, again, what is science? Basically, systematic knowledge of the physical or material world gained through the observations and experimentation. This is dictionary definition of science. Same way, technology, application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. That is basically technology. So if you really look into the Sindh Saraswati Valley civilization, there seems to be advancements in science and using that scientific knowledge to advance their life comforts. So my hypothesis is they made several advancements in both in science and technology. So I'm going to look into that by understanding metals and alloys and materials in general. And there seems to be extraction of metals. And someone asked earlier, whether there is any signs of silver in the Indus Valley. So I'm going to look at gold, copper, iron. Especially extensive work was done by Dr. A.K. Biswas in the analyzing metals and alloys from the Sindh Saraswati Valley. And knowledge of alloys looks like, in the late Harappan era, there seems to be copper alloys, bronze, especially, alloyed with tin and arsenic. We'll find some of those objects. Strength of materials. There seems to have, good knowledge of strength of materials, and we'll look into that. And heat treatment. They seem to understand the science of heat treatment, annealing techniques, and that's very important. As I showed the ceramic scale, if they didn't understand the science of heat treatment, they would not be able to make that kind of objects. Same way some of the pottery that we have seen, ceramic pottery, it's very important to understand that. It's not easy to make those objects. Production of tools, some of them will see seals, how they were making, decorations and jewelry. So gold and silver. So gold is probably easiest material to find because it's available naturally as a metal. Sometimes you will hear the stories in West Coast, the Silicon Valley as well, right? You'll find the gold chunks and so on. The people used to find even today. If you go to some of those places, you can actually find gold chunks, right? So probably they were finding gold chunks and they found a way to use it, make it to ornaments and so on, and they were using it. But later on, some of the analysis of these articles led us to believe that probably these were gold ore was mined and then smelted, and then ornaments were made. As an example of that, like a silver component in some of these ornaments lead to maybe gold ore was probably bought from Kolar mines in Karnataka, and ornaments were made. Copper extraction and smelting. Mahigara, basically they found some of the small copper beads, cylindrical shaped beads, which again carbon-14 dating leads us to believe it's about 7800 BCE. And some of the copper smelting furnaces, earliest copper smelting furnace, you can see found in Harappa, and the schematic of that furnace is here. It's very interesting furnace. We also use similar kind of furnace even today to make some of the metals, like smelting metals and alloys today. The evidence of first copper smelting come from Mahigara about 4700 BCE. Copper ore mining, again K3, it's about 2000, 3000 BCE. Again, the evidence is because the impurities from K3 is very specific, like arsenic and nickel in that slag found close to K3, and some of the smelting furnaces found at K3. Number of smelting furnaces were found close to K3 mines. These are some of the objects they were making, copper plate and some of the figurines and tools. So as you can see, we don't know what these tools were used, but this different variety of tools were made, copper, metal. And this is a lost wax technique, what we call it today. These figurines, dancing figurines that number of people were talking about, these were made with the lost wax technique, which was what we call today developed in Purdue here. So they seem to know very advanced way of making these figurines with alloys, bronze alloys, which is obviously very late technology, probably about 1500 BCE. These are another interesting subject for me, being a metallurgical scientist. So this is something everybody knows. This is from Delhi, probably came from Udaygiri in MP. About they dating they give us about 400 CE, right? And then similar pillar seems to be there in Dhar as well. So the actual modern smelting, iron steel smelting, probably Bismarck's iron smelter, what we call it, came about 1700, 1600, 1700. So how did this pillar came? This with no rusting and so on. There's a lot of research was done. Recently, Balasubramaniam published a lot of papers from IIT Kanpur. So the technique seems to be, before even the iron smelting started, about 1200 BCE in close to Tungabhadra River in Karnataka. So the technique seems to be solid state reduction of iron ore. About 800 degrees Celsius, you can actually reduce iron ore to solid iron. And then they seem to have used what we call it is a disc forging technique to make this pillar. These kind of pillars. So maybe even in Indus Valley, because they seems to find some iron objects and so on, maybe they were using disc forging technique, using solid iron. By accident probably they found, using charcoal, maybe they were reducing iron ore and then doing it. So later on, what they found in close to Tungabhadra, banks of Tungabhadra River, about 60 hectares of smelting plant, iron making plant, about 1200 BCE, and they found a lot of projectiles, nails and rings in that site. And the earliest copper in the iron smelting furnace, which is, you can see here, very small furnace, and this where, pulsating iron, air was used for kind of pumping the air to burn the charcoal and so on. The same kind of technique in modern blast furnaces, iron making blast furnaces, we use same technique, pulsating enriched air, what we use. They seem to use a similar kind of technique. I don't know how old this is, probably sometime after 1000 BCE. So they seem to know to smelt and produce metals and then alloys. And then later on, this iron smelting led to high carbon steel. As we all know by now, that the India is produced high carbon steel, what we call wood steel. Again, they seem to know, they seem to know how to make beads. So these are some of the precious stones. But what is interesting is the micro beads that you see not only India in the Sindh Saraswati Valley, but they seem to spread Mesopotamia and even further. So these specialty of these micro beads, again this technology is also very important for seal making as well. So they seem to kind of use setite to grind, make it as a fine paste, and then using kind of a draw technique, extrusion technique to make these micro beads. These are about 1 millimeter beads with the inner hole about 0.5 millimeters. So you have to really know the technology to make this kind of beads, and then heat treat them so that they don't break and disintegrate when you're making ornaments. As you can see in here, these are kind of necklaces and so on they're making with these micro beads. And these are again ceramic beads, and to make these kind of beads, these are the kind of probably these are copper drills they are using to make these beads, micro beads. These are again some of the bead factories they found in the excavations, and as somebody in previous presenters showed, some of these ornaments and so on, they're using these, these are bangles made of these microbeads. So I think again, from making these kind of microbeads and so on, they seem to know how to kind of control the manufacturing techniques. These are some of the potteries. Again, these potteries are, it looks simple, but it's very difficult to make these. You need to really know the technology, to make some of these. For example, these vessel with holes and so on. If you don't know how to kind of control the temperature and so on, they can crack at that holes and so on, and can really create a lot of problems. And same way, some of the other soma drinking vessels, they're not easy to make. It's very easy to develop stress, and you can crack them while you're manufacturing them. So you need to really know the technology quite well. These are, for example, seal making, same thing. This is a boat encryption. So again, the seals, most of the seals to be, like before the metal came into the picture, like copper and copper alloys, they were all ceramic seals. So again, they seem to use same technology that they were using for microbeads, making some of these seals. And they seem to have exported some of this technology. This seal found in Mesopotamia. As you can see here, this humped bull, again, seemed to be an indication that it actually probably came from Indus Valley and is traveled to, because some of these trees and so on, very typical to Middle East. So probably the technology traveled outside of India. Again, some of these seals, similar kind of technique probably they use to make these seals. So moving on to another subject, astronomy. Again, the evidence that found in Dolavira, these structures, some of the researchers believe probably was kind of observatory. As you can see here, they were trying to kind of figure out what this is. And in the next picture is you can see that based on it retracing what this structure could be. Probably they were kind of trying to use some of these observatories to figure out how seasons come, and this angle, for example, pointing to what we call pointing to Saptarishis in the sky. So they seem to know astrology. And that astronomy, and using that techniques to figure out seasons and so on. And transportation. And again, this is a modern, like you can find this kind of bullock cart in Pakistan today and some parts of India as well. This is a toy cart found in Indus Valley. There are some other carts and wheels. And interestingly, in Harappa, there are more than 2,700 fragments were found. Interestingly, there were different types of carts, two-wheel carts, four-wheel carts, and so on, they found in the Indus Valley. So there seems to be really using these bullock carts or manually pulled carts for transportation. And in the agriculture, they seem to know how to make pawls. The bottom one, this is some, even today, in some of the Indian rural areas, we use this kind of pawl made of iron and steel, right? So this is a terracotta toy pawl, and this is about 2,800 years old field. I don't know how they found it, and from Kalibagan. So again, they were using technology to make advancements in agriculture. Same way, they were using technology to store food. These are some of the Kalibagan, about 6,000 BCE granary they found, Naigara. And this is Lothal, it looks like some warehouses for storing food. Again, they were kind of, using technology to preserve that. And again, water management. We have seen a lot of slides, the tanks, what some of the research call is great baths. And again, as Chandrika said, we don't know whether they're great baths or purifying things or water storage tanks, but they seem to kind of know how to manage water. Again, this is something came from Dolavira. Mazumdaro, and the Great Barrier Complex. In Lothal, they seem to kind of use modern techniques. Like out of the 48 hectares total township, about 12 hectares they were using for storing water. So 1/4 of the total space they were using for storing water. So they seem to know. I mean, again, it's not just one place, either Harappa or Mazumdaro. The entire valley seem to use similar kind of techniques to manage water. So in conclusion, basically what we see is they seem to have made several advancements in science technology. Smelting ore, extraction of metals and making alloys, production of tools, and decorative items, forging and heat treatment. They seem to know how to kind of use the techniques to produce metals and materials. Complex material processing, microbeads we have seen. In today's modern world, making those microbeads is not a small task. Making seals, they seem to know. And they seem to have made advancements in astronomy, transportation, agriculture, food storage, and so on. Third, sanitation, and I'll take very short time on the hygiene and sanitation. So again, they seem to be very particular about hygiene and sanitation and health, and then keep it healthy, keeping healthy. There's an example. Even compared to modern India today, we seem to throw water everywhere and make it dirty our surroundings. But they seem to be very particular how they dispose the water. So water disposal is very important for them. As you can see, this is a well, and they are draining the wastewater into a sump, and then taken out from your living area, right? This is again a kind of commode kind of thing, and water tub for cleaning after use. And these are, like a drainage. This is a small street, probably a side street, and then this drainage around that small street. This is another view. Again, covered, wastewater, like drainage, right? And this is again, as we're seen in the Great Bath. So these are some of the techniques they're using for wastewater disposal. So they seem to know how to manage wastewater quite well. And again, I think this is not a great slide, but we are seeing some of the slides even better, like a yogic pose. That means they seem to be practicing yoga, again, for health management. So again, there's another seal showing yogic pose. So in general, looks like Sindhu Valley seem to care for hygiene and sanitation, and they seem to care for health. So that's, I think, what my conclusion is. So overall, I think they were standardizing the entire region, not just in Harappa and Mazumdaro, but entire Sindh, the Saraswati Valley. They made several advancements in science and technology, particularly metals and alloys, which is very particular to that region. And they seem to care for hygiene and sanitation. So that's basically with that. I thank you for it.
Thank you, Krishna. So now let's take some questions. Richard, you were responding to something that you were saying, so if you please.
Yeah, just a couple of points I wanted to make. Concerning the microbeads made of steatite paste, that's been proved impossible to do. And basically on the basis of the study of the material science of that. And what is now clear that they did is that they basically cut pieces of steatite in chunks, put holes through them, very, very tiny holes, either using a very, very small copper drill or using even a thorn from a kika tree, basically. You can do it with that because the material is so small. Then they would basically shape the bead by hand, and grind it on a stone to make it the right size. And they did this and they have the actual workshop where they have all this material in place.
Yeah, I have read that. Actually, this research was done by Dr. A.K. Biswas, who is very a material scientist from MIT and IIT Kanpur, and he has studied quite well some of these materials, and he has suggested these were made of finely ground setite.
No, actually, it was Hegde from Baroda who first suggested that.
Okay.
And as I said, there have been recently done experiments on this, and it's not possible to do.
Yeah, I mean, different people have different opinions, but
Well, this is
yeah.
this is a scientific debate, okay?
Yeah.
Next point.
The next point is that I think it's important to understand that from the point of view of the inscribed materials, there are seals, there are sealings, which are the stamps of seals, and then there are something which are called tablets. And
Yep.
the tablets can be incised or they can be molded.
Right.
The molded tablets are basically, they make probably an original wooden mold, basically, and then they push material into it, and they make multiple copies of the same thing.
Yeah.
And this can be done on using either clay, or it can be done using faience. And the faience technology of the Indus civilization is without parallel in the ancient world. It's better than the Egyptian faience. It's multicolored faience, which is very unusual. And this is one of the high points of Indus technology.
Okay.
Another high point of Indus technology is their copper working, which is quite remarkable. And there's been a lot of work on sourcing the copper and on looking at the techniques of conifer manufacture, which are very sophisticated. A final thing is that nobody's pointed out here in the decorative material. Somebody showed a bango of with the edges, like scalloped edges out of it. That's made out of faience, actually. That's a faience bangle. Faience is silica, which is ground up and basically fired to a very high temperature. The other thing which they did, making to a very high temperature, they made a true stoneware. Stoneware which is yet to be able to be replicated. It's extremely hard, and it's fired in a reducing atmosphere to make it black, or sometimes the canister breaks and it actually turns out red because it gets oxygen in it. But these are other examples of the remarkable technology of the Indus people.
Definitely. What was silk also?
Okay, somebody asked me about silk. Yeah, we found basically a necklace of copper, and preserved in the hole in the beads, basically, were strands of material and it was determined that this was actually silk, and the silk was has been identified as being from local South Asian moths, basically, silkworms, and not from Chinese ones. And this sort of tussar silk basically is well known in India. There was a big trade in it in the 19th century. There were people from Britain who went to India specifically and set up silk plantations and what have you for the local silk worms, basically, and developed this silk industry, which was eventually overtaken by the massive Chinese industry. But you can still get tussar silk to some degree in India today.
Any other questions?
What about tin?
Tin, what's that?
Tin, because tin is important for making bronze, and tin is not available in India.
That's right. Tin ore is not available, but I think some of the probably the smelting that was done, copper ore smelting was done. Maybe it has traces of tin. One sample that I have seen was 7% tin in some of the samples they analyzed. So probably the copper ore source they got maybe had some impurities of tin. Don't know. But only one sample out of 20 or 25 that I have seen has about 7% tin.
Thank you. Our Next topic is economy and politics, and the presenter is Sanjeev Tripathi. Where's Sanjeev? Okay. Sanjeev Tripathi is a writer, poet, and entrepreneur. He's an active participant in the cultural events in the local area with an interest in religion and literature. He helps India Discovery Center in content organization and meeting planning. He conducts the annual essay competition for children on behalf of India Discovery Center.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So how is everyone doing after that nice lunch and in-depth science presentation by Dr. Krishna Gajula? So yeah, so I'm not sure how Mr. Raji chosen the order, but we gone through religion and philosophy, science, and we haven't talked how these people what they were doing for their living. How was the government? What was the source of economy? So now this is the last presentation, but let's talk learn how the people they were the living doing for their food and just so. Okay, so here in this presentation we are going to talk about there are two sections. One is economy and politics. Economy is so let's first kind of understand because these definitions of economy and politics, if we ask someone we have Richard or a couple of people from Harvard, so if you ask from Harvard professor, it's going to be just very dense definition, and whatever if you ask someone from far rural area so it's a different definition for economy. So I put together a little bit definition an economy is a process or system by which goods and services are produced, distributed and traded in local region and outside world. So that's economy. And the politics, art or science of governing, administering and controlling a political entity unit for its internal or external affairs. So this is defining what we are really going to talk because okay, so now let's talk about economy. What was the what sort of economy was at Indus Valley? And again, definitely as Richard mentioned and other presenters, definitely a lot more things need to be uncovered because whatever now things, whatever interpretations or assumptions are based on whatever knowledge or information whatever artifacts they found. So definitely whatever things it is only based on that, but there are a lot more things need to be uncovered. So far economy, whatever learn economy, the agriculture and trade, that was the major source for the economy. And most of Indus Valley people, they were farmers. They grew variety of crops such as wheat, barley, melons, cotton. So that's, and the second the trade, that was the second source of the economy. And it was just the main agricultural products, so the trade was happening both, these are agricultural products and then they have some commercial products also. So the agricultural products like a cotton, variety of grains, and then commercial products like copper, pulse, clothes, ivory coins, and jewelry. So definitely that agriculture, that was the primary source of economy, but the trade was also had some role to play in that. And let's talk about the agriculture. So definitely the agriculture, even in the previous slide we saw the seal is showing some carving, stone carving, showing some very organized agricultural activities. So definitely agriculture was not just simply throw the seed and just go and just cut the crop, but it was systematic and organized. And so it is, they found stone carving showing agricultural activities and just found various seals and signs related to agricultural activities. various animals and plants were domesticated to support agricultural activities, and animal husbandry, that was also major source of food supplies. So if we see, most of the seals, we find the animals, all variety of animals. So definitely, this domestication of animals, that was they already done long back, and they how to use different animals. So definitely, they know how to really take just very systematic and organized agricultural activities. So here are a little bit, let's take some more in-depth understanding about agriculture related activities. Some of the pictures has been already Krishna he mentioned, but again I'm also pointing out here. So they found one of the agricultural field which was plowed, and that part of the excavation, and so they noticed it has been systematically plowed, and they found one toy, the plow toy, and it's even now some part of the rural South Asian India, Pakistan, that they use the similar kind of plow. And they found some other tools which are being used for agricultural related activities. So definitely they found a lot more tools and other things, and which they use for agricultural related activities. So definitely agriculture was systematic and very organized, and then yes, they were very much doing surplus production, because whenever we're talking about the trade for agricultural products, so definitely it was more than enough to just feed local community, and then trading it whatever the surplus. So let's talk about because agriculture then irrigation, and as Richard he pointed out they knew how to take advantage of the rainwater whenever it's coming from the mountains. So just get it stored in some pond or whatever or use the stream for the irrigation. And so and then on the left side of the picture it is even some part in the rural they use this kind of technique to take it out the water from the well and irrigate. But most of the time looks like they use either the flood irrigation. So I read looks like purposely sometimes they block some kind of portion of the river and just flooded the fields, and they knew whatever the minerals and other thing coming with the flood that get settled down, and that can help for work as a fertilizer. So really they purposely doing that thing, and then whatever the rain harvesting the water from the rain and coming from mountains, so they were storing in different ponds and later on utilize it for various agricultural and drinking of different purpose. So definitely they had just really the good water management techniques. They knew about those. So let's go about further proving the point yeah, agriculture it was really systematic, and they knew how to do the surplus and how to store it, because the granary we talk about the great granary and a couple of other places they found granaries. So it indicates whenever they had the surplus production of food, so they were storing it for later time, or maybe as part of the tax collection authorities. So they had these great granaries, and even Krishna he mentioned about food preservation. So for keeping it food for some longer time, treating it. So they knew about those techniques. So the agriculture is not just simply growing the food, they want how to store it correctly and then preserve it, some of the food, and so definitely they were using those things. On the right side is showing toy bullock cart, and that definitely it was the major mode of the on-ground transportation. So for agricultural and just even trade, so on-ground transportation, that was the major mode. Okay, so this slide, it shows it about trade network. And so the trade, when we initially mentioned the agriculture and trade. So by looking at this map and even some subsequent slides, we're going to learn like, the trade was not a simple like, thing they can do just surplus production of food and some other thing, but they were really like, doing very systematic and very like, high order of like, trade activities. And if we look about like, this slide, so the major cities, like, Richard and some other people mentioned like, the Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and Ghaneri Valley, and just Rakhigari. So most of those are situated either like, some kind of like, river, or even like, some of the towns, they are on the coastal areas. So the trade, right away indicates, because whenever like, agricultural society, whenever like, the cities got, or towns, like, they got established, definitely like, the trade, that was the major thing, like, the cities and towns always like, even now, and the trade centers, big trade centers. So, and all the time this like, established near like, water, so to take advantage for the transportation and just like, so the river or sea. So this next slide, like, this shows like, on the left side, the boat is still like, we saw one of the seal, and so flat bottom boat, even right now in that region, they use that. So there were a lot more like, maritime activities, and on the right side, the top, this elephant seal. And this seal, like, particularly, I think whatever is unanimously, everyone agreed, like, this seal being used for trade purpose. So whenever, like, they were selling, they were sending some goods, so this seal they will use, like, put the label, like, to who is the person, to whom the owner and other things. So, and then bottom on the right side, like, it's showing some measuring, like, balance and some weighing methods. So, like, definitely, like, they know how to really, like, all these trades, doing, like, use all the, like, the weighing methods and discounting. So definitely, like, a lot more, these things indicates the trade was, like, really happening at the, really, with the very sophisticated and very, like, heavily. And this slide, it shows about like, map. So the one thing, like, the trade or whatever, like, the activities were happening in the Indus area. So it's not only for the raw material which they were getting from the just local just mines or local, like, places. Even, like, from too far, like, Krishna mentioned from Karnataka, they got like gold. And they got, like, silver from, like, some Afghanistan, K3 from copper. So it was somehow like, it became like, trade and just like a manufacturing center. They were getting this raw material from like too far places and getting those processed here, and then, like, maybe I can say just like, distributing those finished goods in other part of like other regions. So it's showing the network about, like, the raw material they were getting from too far and just like, bringing it and process and just like, and this is the slide, like, even Krishna, he included in his presentation, like, they found, like, bead factory, like, and on the left side, the very first one, it is like, some dyer's workshop. Okay, on the middle one, it's showing some unfinished cell circulates. So basically, like, you can see, like, some raw material, some factories, some, like, some finished products. So the whole, like, the manufacturing related activities, we can see, like, evidences of those, like, it was the systematic end-to-end process that was happening there. And recently, just like, now Richard, he mentioned about, like, we talked about silk, okay, and just like textile. So definitely, like, that was the cotton, that was the, like, their commercial crop. And on the left side, it's a silk they found somewhere, like, in the part of the weed or somewhere. So this is the silk, and it is, like, not from the China, it is from the local region. Okay, so the silk production that was happening on the right side, they found some jute. Okay, so that indicates, like, really the textile, or that was, like, really it was happening seriously, like, the production of the textile industry. And they were, like, the trading, like, these cotton and other things to Mesopotamia and other regions. So it is like, using all that, the network to sending this like the goods to other regions. And this is simulation slide picture for the marketplace. So definitely like, the cities, they were kind of like, center for the trade and manufacturing. And so the towns or rural areas, they were like, agricultural related activities. So just the agricultural activities or the food, it was coming from the rural area to cities. And mainly in the cities and towns, traders and artisans. That was the like a major population there. And this is a picture from like, Lothal, like it's showing one of the dockyard and the warehouse on the right side. And it is like, they found the evidence like, there's a warehouse is next to, very close to dockyard. So it is showing some infrastructure that time, like, for the supporting the trade related activities. Like they had like, the dockyard and just warehouse and other like, plants, like, factories. So it's a lot more like, if you put together all those things, it tells a story about like, their manufacturing and the trade related activities. Okay, let's move about like, the administration part. So like, we already covered like, their economy, trade and just agriculture. So like, let's learn like, what they were doing, like, what was the administration kind of. And we saw like this picture on the left side, like it is called like, priest or king. And on the right side, they have like, the Mohenjo-daro, the citadel, like, so the whole idea is they found a lot more seals, and on the seals, like a variety of animals. And it looks like, I think, interpretation is like, on these seals, like various animals, there's some hierarchy in place. So like, if we see like a jabu bull, like, in male water buffalo, tiger, unicorn. So it's going in some order, like, so that like, maybe senior most person is using the jabu bull. Okay, so it was some kind of like, hierarchy and administrative things. The cities and towns, the administration was like, very efficient and well planned, like, even Richard mentioned and some other, we saw like, just like, layout of the cities, like, they were well planned, the streets, and just like, look about their water management, drainage, so it's well planned cities. And this one is showing like, definitely some standards, like, when you compare like, from town to another town or whatever, like, so there is some kind of similarity, some kind of like, they following same standard. So it looks like, I think there may be some centrally they connected, some authorities which they are following the same standards, and putting together like, these big, the buildings, like, citadel, like, Great Wall, granary. So definitely like, there was some kind of like, efficient governance or administration that was in place. And even the Mohenjo-daro, like, it has like two level, like, one is upper, that one is mainly looks like for administrative and just like, those kind of like, activities, and the lower level, it is more residential. And even the residential one, like, it has like, some houses are bigger, some is smaller, so looks like there is some kind of like, socio-economic, the hierarchy was in place. Okay, so this picture is another like showing like well and like water drainage, and on the right side, and the left side is the simulated picture, and it's showing like mainly like, the local, so the water management, because they were like, really like, taking advantage and just like, river and diverting it so they can have like, access to the water from all corner of the town or city. So that's like, really they have better water management processes. And they found like, very little evidence for like, any warfares or like, tools for the defense. But they have like, city walls, like, most of the towns, they have city walls. So either they could be for like, flood, or it could be like, just wild animals. But definitely it was not just like, for defense. So these are like some of inferences or observations. It appears that the economy was flourishing and primarily based on agriculture and trade. Agricultural activities were organized, systematic, advanced system was placed internal, external trade. City was mainly for trade activities and surrounding areas for agricultural activities. It appears to have that theocracy, like, in place. Just like this interpretation, a lot more analysts they are coming out. Like priests and traders run government, so it was more efficient and just like priests like issuing some orders, people following it. So more on office efficient thing, and traders they were running the business. And it seems like towns and they were like autonomous, but some central authorities in place. And unknowns, there are definitely a lot more unknowns, but here are a few of them. Why there is no evidence of grain found in granaries, because we call granaries, but no evidence of grains. Why there is no currency in such a flourishing economy and high order civilization. Okay. And how the Indus Valley cities and towns were interconnected politically. Okay. Why there was no evidence of defense system. Okay. Why seals were in abundance. Like some people, some speculation is like they could be used as a currency, but like because if you can find big numbers like the seals, so these are. And then what was the process of like choosing ruler? So these are like some of the questions, unknown questions. Here is some take-home message. People were farmers and traders with a transportation network. Possibly all trade was water, no evidence of currency. They developed the good craftsmanship and trade skills, and they were using method of rain harvesting and irrigation. Cities or towns were connected to some central authority. There was administrative units in the settlement, but overall, like no king kind of rule. It seems there were little defense arrangements. So these are the yamis, I think, be coming out some interpretations.